Okay. So the echo is gone. So welcome everyone. So excited for this book club and this launch because the author himself is with us. So I'll just give a quick introduction um, about like how we will use the graph, how we will interact with each other. So we have to have a bit of structure, not total chaos, but maybe only a bit of chaos to read together this book and become writers of useful books. So that's the goal of this book club, to learn how to do this using this playbook from Rob. Okay, so just a quick introduction of why my objective for starting this. Like when I presented this to Matt and the other folks at the Rome clubs, like this was my pitch. So why do you want to do this? So because I remember like around 20, 23 years ago, I was with my uncle that I was like a teenager and I was like didn't know what I was going to do with my life. So one of the things I told him was that I want to be a writer. But that sort of never happened in the past 20 years until last year. Like I guess everyone was considering their mortality back then. And the question was, how do I make this real? In November of 2020, Rob's book or his early beta version came out. When I saw it, hey, maybe this is the pathway, because the way he was presenting it and the way he's like the playbook was very familiar to me. I mean, I used like his earlier book, The Mom Test, to start a business. And this is like a reapplication of those principles for writing a book. So, and I actually did that. I wrote a book. So, I mean, that bucket list item is there, but I wanted to keep doing it for the rest of my life. No? So, to be a writer, someone who writes books and also a pro, someone who earns from writing books. So I want to master this playbook, and I invite you to join me in that journey of mastering this playbook. So yeah, so a quick background on the graph strategy. So I'll be going deeper into this Thursday and recording a video on this. On how we will collaborate. So again, the goal is to become writers of useful books, and we will read this book together and to collaboratively ask questions and answer questions, so that the resulting actions that come out of those discussions will bring us closer to become writers of useful books. So we will make use of this graph. You will be added to this graph after this meeting. So Matt, if you haven't received it yet, Matt will also post a link to the sign up form where you could put the proof of purchase, and Matt will add you to this graph. So just very basic standards. So all notes, just agree that all notes should be under the date, a date when you're taking the notes, your name or your alias or whoever the author is, and the book chapter. So wherever you take notes, whether it's daily notes pages, that's normally where I take notes. But if you want to take notes in your page, that's also good. Just put it under, just put the date and put the chapter of the book or chapter you take notes on. And then block reference the paragraph that you are taking notes on, so that when you're reading the book, when we read the book, we could look at the graph references. We could see people's questions related to the graph reference. So please avoid writing in the chapters themselves. So you could see the chapters. So Rob has allowed us to put all the chapters of the book here so that we could make notes on them. And then there are 3 key tags that we'll be using in this graph. One is a question tag. So for questions related to the book. So also we will use this graph purely for the book. For questions related to the club, the schedules, the logistics, let's make use of the Write Useful Books channel in the Rome Slack. So here's an example. So this could be, you could indent the chapter here and then block reference the paragraph, and then maybe your question here, and then maybe related things there. So if you want to answer this, you will see questions from other users in the graph, and you could add answers by block referencing this question, this block, into your page or in your daily notes pages indented under your name. So once you're in the block, so you will also see this, and then you could ask questions in Slack or in Twitter, and we'll figure this out as we go along. This is my first time to run a book club, and so super excited, and we're super open as well to suggestions how to do this. Okay, so yeah, we could start with the, let's see, graph for the book. So Matt will send the form to get access. I think he'll set that in his chat. More details this Thursday, Friday, that will be recorded. So that's like 6 a.m. I think in the West Coast, maybe 9 p.m. in the East Coast. But we are designing this so it could be asynchronous. All right, so next, so we don't want to spend time there. I just want to introduce Rob. So he is the author of Right Use of Books, The Mom Test. So that was, and then this book on designing and teaching workshops. And the Mom Test, it has grown through word of mouth. So this is like the dream to design a book so that it sells itself. So, and this is the proof. Rob has built a book that has sold itself. So, and I tested this. I tested this playbook, and at least there's our book now. So now I want to move forward and write the Amazon book version. So yeah. So let's welcome Rob, everyone.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Khalil. Yeah, I'm basically here to answer questions and be helpful if I can. Yeah, so far it's been 3 books. They collectively, I do very little marketing. I actually have 0 email list, so I don't have any sort of big author platform or anything like that. And the books currently do about 20,000 a month, give or take, in royalties, and that seems to be growing pretty consistently. They're on different topics. One's about business, one's about education. The third is about nonfiction. And yeah, like I guess what I feel makes it work is treating the books not like a literature piece, but like a problem-solving product. And when you see it through that lens, a lot of stuff changes. You think about, like, a reader has to pay for every book twice. They pay once with the cover price, but they pay again with their time. And so a lot of authors want to cram more and more words into the book, but actually that's making it more expensive for the reader because you're costing them more time to get the same takeaway. So there's a few ideas like that, making super heavy use of both talking to readers, face-to-face or through Zoom, lots of iterations of beta reading. There's a lot of stuff that goes into the, when you start thinking about books as products. But basically, it's your show. I'm here to help. I will answer any question I can as best as I can. And yeah, I'm at your disposal.
Yeah, so maybe we could use the hand raise as a way to organize ourselves in asking questions. So maybe I could ask the first question. Actually, the question that I showed in the example is like, in what situations is this style of writing? So what was the old style of writing books? Because I'm a first-time writer, and what is the application of this one?
So if you think about fiction, this isn't quite a fiction nonfiction divide, but it's close enough that we can start thinking about it that way. So fiction is kind of an act of independent genius. It's one genius author who's kind of putting their work. It's an art piece, right? And the process for that is very much what you get with other art. where the author goes into secret for an extended period of time, and they sort of they trust their own type of book, not all nonfiction, but a lot of it, where when readers pick it up, they're picking it up for a purpose. They want to learn something. They want to understand something. They want to achieve something. They want to see the world in a new way, to undergo a process, to make a change in their life, to build a new skill. And these books, the value proposition of them is different. They're not saying, hey, trust me as an artist. They're saying, hey, this book contains something that's going to be valuable to your life. And if you read this book, don't trust me as an artist, trust me as a guide to take you through that journey and bring you to the knowledge or the outcome that you wanted. And these types of books behave very differently. Like, for example, I've been trying to learn chess, and I read books about chess. And you read a book about chess, and it's like, I can tell that the author is smart and that they're better at chess than I am. But by reading the book, I've learned nothing. Because for whatever reason, their knowledge hasn't succeeded in crossing the air gap from the author's head to the book, or from the book to me. For whatever reason, there's some sort of bug in the knowledge that hasn't allowed it to arrive into my head and to affect my behavior. And so because of that, I'm not going to recommend those books, despite it being clear to me that they were written by someone very smart, because it didn't touch my life. Whereas there's other books where you read it and you're like, wow, that is poorly written. It's a bit of a mess, but like, it let me improve my business, or it let me improve my life, or it helped me understand something that was important to me that I didn't understand before. And so the core argument is like, if you're writing a novel, or I call them pleasure givers, other examples would be something like biography or memoir. It's like people read them for the fascination with the topic, or much history. In that case, the prose matters a lot, and you know, you trust your sense of craft. In this other category, it's less about what the author gives, and it's more about what the reader receives. And when that's true, you want to be as in contact with your readers as early in the process as you're able. You want to, for example, I use a coaching conversation. So if I was writing a book about chess, I'm terrible at chess, but if I was, it would start by teaching people chess face to face, right? This isn't a crazy idea. And figuring out, okay, does the table of contents work? Does the knowledge work? Does the metaphor, does the way I describe it work? This is where my first book about entrepreneurship came from. I'd spent a lot of time talking with other entrepreneurs and being like, it's not working for them. I must be explaining it wrong. Let me change the metaphor. Let me change the stories. Let me change the structures. And so by the time I went to write the book, it was like, okay, I already know the knowledge works. It's just a matter of picking the words now, which is a much easier challenge. And then again, with beta readers, it's the same idea. It's like, it's not about the words you put down. It's about the knowledge the reader receives, which changes the whole way you develop the book.
I might just jump in there, Rob, with the next one. So you're talking about an idea. What's the role of an idea? Do you start with an idea? You talked about not actually writing a book on chess. Why not chess? Why writing about books instead? And how do you make that decision?
So, writing a book is a lengthy undertaking. I'm sure quite a few of you have done it already, or have gotten deep into the process. And you know it's a big commitment of time and energy and attention, right? Like that time has to come from somewhere. And so it's taken away from other parts of your life. And so to me, that's too big of a project to go into cynically. And I'm a bit of I drift, I get distracted. There's always something shiny and new and exciting. So for me to follow through on a year-long journey of, you know, committing a couple hours every day, it has to be something that I pretty deeply care about, either because I'm really fascinated by it and I enjoy thinking about it for a couple hours each day and working through it, or because I really care about the benefit to the reader. And it's worth it to me from an impact perspective to suffer through it, because I care about getting the message out into the world. I think there's certainly some more mercenary ways to approach books, especially if you treat them as digital information products where you have a lot more pricing power. And in those cases, they can be like a very profitable and in some cases optimal use of the time. But for me, it's like, the way I view the decision to write a book is this something that I'm excited to spend the next 12 to 18 months thinking about every day? And if so, then then it's probably a good one for me to commit to. And then I'll also throw in some sanity checks. So I'll also be like, is there likely to be a market for this? Is the book's promise sharp enough and valuable enough to a certain type of reader that it's going to be important to them in a way that they're going to complain about it when it's not solved, and they're going to recommend the book after it has been solved. So for example, like there's some books I've thought of where it's like, ooh, that's interesting to me, but like it's impossible for me to imagine the situation where someone goes, this is the worst part of my life, how do I solve it? And someone goes, aha, this book is the answer, you have to read this book. And so it's both of those. The excitement pulls me in, but then there's also these caveats that I want to make sure, because I want my books to succeed commercially, both because that gives me the freedom and the security in my life, but also because a book succeeding commercially is a proxy for it succeeding or delivering impact, because your book's profits track its readership. And so the more profitable it is, the more readers have received value from it, recommended it. So whether you're pursuing impact, it's like just a simplified metric that I can track. So that's how I think about it.
You have a question from Mikal?
Yeah. Hi, Rob. So maybe a related question. How much do you need to know in order to start writing a problem-solving book? And maybe a more concrete version, what's the lowest level of initial knowledge that you have seen a successful author start with?
When I wrote my first book, I had basically zero credibility. And that book's now taught at Harvard, MIT, like all the world's top universities teach it. And they don't teach it because I was credible. It's the reverse. Like I'm credible because that book happened to work as a standalone unit. And I think it's important. I don't know like an optimal answer for this, but I'll tell you the way I think about it is there's value. So people know when you're overplaying your hand. Like people have ridiculously good bullshit detectors, right? And they know when an author is like insecure and trying to pretend that they're more credible than they are. However, there's also huge benefit to taking advice from someone who's only 2 steps further ahead than you are. For example, to go back to chess, if you were trying to learn chess, like a grandmaster is so out of touch with where I'm at right now that they may not be able to help me. Whereas some of my buddies who are a couple hundred points ahead of me in their chess rankings, they're able to give me better advice than grandmasters because they remember the struggles that I'm dealing with today. So it's not always about being the world's best. It's about, in many ways, being empathetic to the context and the situation that your reader is currently in and remembering what it's like for them to be struggling. That's not the only way. Another way to set up and deal with the credibility problem is to say, I don't know the answer, but figuring it out is important to me. I'm going to be spending this writing journey, like trying to do it, trying to learn it, trying to understand it. I would love if you joined that journey of learning with me. And so then you're saying, like, you're not saying I have all the answers. You're saying I'm giving an honest attempt at this journey, and I'm going to share my lessons along the way. That's a way to do it. Another way to do it, which I did with the mom test, is I said, I have no idea how to start a successful business. Like I failed. I tried, I failed. However, there's one piece of that journey that everyone needs to know how to do. And I did figure out that piece. Let me tell you about this piece. It would be the equivalent of saying, I don't know how to climb Mount Everest, but I do know how to tie a good knot. Let me tell you about knots so that hopefully your journey up Everest like doesn't fail because of this issue. So to me, it's like you can scope it. You can find a way to be authentic and to present the piece that you do know or the piece that excites you in an honest and valuable way. And part of this is also choosing which readers you're not going to serve. For example, Michelle's in our nonfiction authors community. It's nice to see a familiar face. And we were in our writing group this morning. Ben, one of the other authors, he was saying like he's writing a book about how to present. He's a designer, how to present designs to clients. So how to give your design pitch. And he was saying today, he's like been feeling imposter syndrome. He's like, he's worried what his peers will think, but he's a senior designer. He's running a firm. And it's like, those aren't your readers. Your readers are the people they're hiring. Your readers are the new designers. So don't beat yourself up about what like an expert's going to think, right? Figure out like, who are you serving? Don't worry about the people you're not serving. And can you do something amazing for a new designer? Absolutely. So it's like, those are a few ideas, but it's just about, it's like, you've got something worth saying to someone, you know, it's just like finding that and then presenting it clearly so the right people read it and the wrong people skip it.
Next question is from Gad.
Hi, Rob. Somewhat related question. I'm curious about your process of writing versus editing. So, like some people describe it as divergence versus convergence. If you could talk a little bit about how do you think about that in terms of scoping things, but when you're when you're ready to start editing and compressing things, when you're trying to expand them. I'd love to hear about that a little bit.
Great question, and I don't think I'll tell you what I do, and then I'll tell you the other ways that I've seen like really successful authors also make it work. So I use teaching and as my version 1 of a book. So I'll write the value proposition of the book. So, you know, this book is going to help this sort of person like understand, achieve, do this thing. It's like the one-liner of what the book is for, which will later be used as part of this Amazon blurb. And then I'm like, okay, let me go find some of those readers, because if they care about the outcome of the book, they're also going to care about me just like giving them that advice or helping them through it or bouncing ideas around. I've been doing this through Zoom, through communities. I've done it in person. I've done it through formal coaching. I've done it informally where it's like, hey, I seems like you're thinking about this a lot. I'd love to help you out with it. You know, I'm not trying to sell anything. It's just I'm researching a book, and working through the challenges with you would be super helpful for me as book research. And then they're like, ooh, that feels comfortable because both sides are getting something. And that's how I do a lot of the verification of my table of contents. And also I'm figuring out exactly who it's for. So for example, with Write Useful Books, I thought it would be appealing to authors within the traditional publishing world, because they tend to have a hard time on royalties, and like publishers push a lot of work back to them, but they universally hated it. And I don't know why, you know, maybe it's like a different worldview, maybe it's a sunk cost thing, but it just didn't resonate. Whereas first-time authors, both traditionally published and self-published, and also self-published authors and people trying to achieve like some sort of financial freedom, for them, it resonated tremendously. And so I thought that wasn't something I knew in advance. I thought, ooh, this topic could be relevant to all these groups, but by talking to a few of them, I'm like, they hate me, they love it. So like, who am I going to write for? That's a pretty easy choice at that point. And you can also learn that through beta reading, which I do a lot of. So I run beta reading in kind of 2 to 6 week iterations where I'll bring in a batch of readers, normally invite between 12 to 20, because 3/4 of them won't actually read the thing, even if they said they want to. And I basically look for where they give up, and I look for where they get confused, and I look for, and over times, it's not scientific, but you get a pretty clear intuitive signal about like this type of reader is really valuing it, right? They're proceeding further, they're dealing with the typos, they're asking deep questions that shows they're trying to apply it to their lives. It's like, okay, like, you know, and then you have a little design decision or a scoping decision. So that's the way I do it. The way I've seen other people do it is much more one-to-many through blogging. So this was used by Marty Kagan, Nir Eyal, Seth Godin does this, Arvid Kahl does this, where they write the early versions of their book. So if you follow Seth Godin's blog, you'll notice that he tends to shift topic of his blog about once per year. And at the end of it, a book comes out, which is mysteriously about that topic. And it's clear that he's been, as he's thinking through these ideas and he's working on concepts and paragraphs and sections, those are going out as little blog posts. And that's kind of, you're not getting super clear scientific data back, but you get a feeling from the audience if you have an audience. And if you don't, you can slowly build an audience like this. Arvid Kahl, when he wrote his first book, Zero to Sold, he said when he started, he had something like 500 Twitter followers and 0 email followers. And by just sharing each section and each paragraph as he wrote it, he would send it out as the week's newsletter. He would put it out as a blog post. He would narrate it as a podcast. All of this he started from scratch. He said by the time he finished that book, a year later, he'd gone from 500 to 5,000. And he's like, and that was enough to launch his book at #1. And he and Marty also said this, that they don't do nearly as much beta reading as I do. And I think the reason, and why they've still been, Marty's way more successful than I am. I think the reason for that is that they've been able to use this kind of writing in public, blogging, as a way to pull in this data from the universe, whereas mine is much more like a little bit more structured, but also arguably more time consuming. Those are the ways I've seen it work, and there may well be other options that we haven't discovered yet.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see Joanne is the next hand raiser. I couldn't see her hand, the dark hand, sorry.
Hi. Rob, thank you, by the way, Kahil, for doing this for all of us. It's 8 o'clock, so I need a little coffee to get going, but I really appreciate the time. I'm completely passionate about everything. I wanted to ask 2 questions that give you, Rob, the choice of which path to follow. The first is your tiny habits, your daily tiny habits, looking at your table of contents, and I'm going, I chunk my day into tiny habits. How am I going to make that happen with this book? Considering also that I'm doing the other Rome Book Club at the same time, I tend to be a little bit overachieving. So that's one whole little tranche of question. And the other one is, and so you get to pick. The other one is tying this topic to Rome research, and to knowledge management, and to personal knowledge management. So you pick which one you want to follow. Okay, well, thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And it looked like Charles is next up, I believe, for questions. I saw a hand there. My habit is really simple for writing, which is I give writing my first best hour every day. That's it. Before I check messages, before I deal with the day's drama, before I worry about whatever problem my business is having, before I deal with the messy house, it's like the first best hour each day. For me, that's what works. And some days I continue and I have a whole day full of writing, and it's a joy because I'm excited and I'm pulling on that thread of investigation and delight and figuring out how to help a reader. Other days, like even that 1 hour is just a grind, right? It's like face against the wall, just trying to push your face through bricks. And it's like, well, that sucked. But I'm like, well, I did my hour, good enough. That's what I do. That's worked for me. When I'm stumped, or if I find I'm hating the book or losing my energy, the ways I have of getting out of it, one is to reconnect with readers. So if I'm losing my momentum, I try to get it back in front of readers, either as a beta reading version of whatever the new ideas are, sometimes sending out a little sample to a few trusted people, being like, hey, I'm super stuck on this, or sometimes a coaching conversation, even if I don't want to show the words, just something because it gets so abstract, right? You're spending so much time at your desk in front of a screen. And the reason you're doing this is to get a valuable idea out into the world that's going to make people's lives better, their worlds better, their work, whatever. And so that reconnection with readers is really helpful for me. Also, in terms of more like tactically, switch mediums. So I got a laser printer. It's real fast. I'm just like, oh, I'm stuck on this chapter. I just print it on paper. I go out, I sit in the sun, read it on paper. It's a different experience. And for some reason, the medium change, for me at least, it really unhooks my thinking and allows me to think differently. I've got these, so I use these springback binders. So if you can see this, so these, all the pages come out, it's just loose leaf pages. And so I print out my book and I just stick whatever I'm thinking about in here. It lets me work on the current draft in a way that feels booky. I would love to believe I'm rational enough for these things not to matter because it's purely aesthetics, right? But like going to a cafe with a leather bound book and cracking it open and it's like my words and I get to work on it with a red pen instead of like the tedium of a computer screen that feels like email. Whatever. It's like we're all irrational creatures, right? And this works for me. It tricks my brain and it gets me excited. It changes the energy and it refills me instead of draining me. So that's what I do when I'm really stumped. those context switches. And as for Rome, honestly, you guys are the better experts than me. So I'll try not to speak to stuff I don't know, but I'm super excited. Like books as a medium have not evolved much. And the reason I was so excited when Khalil told me about this group is because, oh, I want to see what's produced. So I'm going to be following along. I'll help out if I can, but mostly I'm just excited to learn from you guys because you're the masters of knowledge management and exploration. And I hope to pick up a trick or two along the way.
And
So, yeah,
next
looks like
Charles.
Am I on mute? Can you hear me? Excellent, excellent. Rob, thank you very much indeed for this. This is really very useful to me, and I'll tell you why. I mean, I'm coming in a certain way from the old book publishing world, and I can see how the maths just isn't really working for so many new ideas, and a lot of really hopeful writers are out there still, trying to find publishers and so on, and they simply don't understand how a publisher thinks in terms of the risk that he's taking, right? So this, along with things like Rome, have really got me thinking in a very different ways. And I'm, I also found just this morning, for example, I bought your workshop book. Also, I've started, buying books on Kindle and so on as well, because salvaging some of the good ideas there is very easy in a digital world. But I wanted to say, one of the things that I am struggling with a little bit, because I have a very strong book idea, and I'm following your principles on this from the book on really useful stuff, and I can see how valuable that is. The difficulty is when we're always trying to assess if there's a market and how big that market could be, and we really are sticking our thumbs up in the cold, wet, cold air, and really the numbers that we start to see at the end of that are what helps us to get out of bed in the mornings. Is it really worth it or not? And you must be, I mean, you've obviously learned to live with all the total uncertainty of all of this in producing some new idea without having any idea if I build it, will they come? Yeah, this idea, if I build it, will they come? So my question, I suppose, is something like, if I build it, will a certain amount of people come anyway, right? And secondly, your ideas about testing and beta testing are to reduce the risk, and as you said about Godin, steer you in the direction of where the real interest is. This is very good value. So my question there would be, do you rate a platform like Medium, for example, to test some of your ideas by writing maybe parts of the book as a blog post and then see what happens there and allow yourself to be guided by that? I know I've said a lot there, but I'm very interested in your ideas, and I'd be very interested to know what you think about this.
Yeah, it seems like you're thinking about it deeply. You're wrestling with the realities, which is great. So when you, how do I say this? Starting a blog or building an audience from scratch takes a while to spin up. And so if you're looking at the timescale of a single book, yes, it will help you, but probably not in a transformational way. Because an audience, like the slowest part of building an audience is the first year or two. And when you're starting from zero. And so you're doing that alongside your book, but the difference between launching with 0 people on an email list and 1,000 people on an email list is not nothing. There's part of this is due to the way Amazon works. Amazon has some internal triggers where, for example, if your book will not be recommended as a related product until it's sold a copy for 5 days in a row, like organically. And you go, okay, so 5 days in a row, like if I'm telling 10 friends about it, then I'm sort of waiting, but I'm stuck in this backwater of Amazon where they're not giving me full promotion because they're not sure if they can trust me yet. And so ideally what happens is alongside your book while writing it, and this is part of beta reading also, like where do beta readers come from? Well, the same place that customers come from. You're basically sharing your thoughts in progress. You're sharing, and it doesn't have to be finished prose. It could be the research you're doing. It could be the dead ends you're hitting. It could be your process as an artist or a creator. Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. is a very short, practical book that describes different ways of just putting yourself out there when you don't have a finished product. If you do that, what does that cost you? 5%, 10% of your daily time? Like, that will kind of allow you to get this drip of beta readers. It won't give you like the brilliant, like take over the world launch, but it gets you started. And then if the book is useful, like with the mom test, my first book, I'd sold 100 copies as early access. And then after that, I did a combination of blogging, event giveaways, selling copies to conferences. I did a mix of things. I ended up selling 800 copies myself, just 800. That's not a huge number. And now the book sold 100,000 copies. That book's done 550,000 in royalties thus far. You know, it's taught at all the big universities. It did not have a launch spike. Its launch month was terrible. But like through the beta reading, through the coaching, I knew that it was useful. And I tried to write it in a way that was timeless because I figured I don't have the reputation or the platform to make this an instant success. So I need to design the book to remain relevant for a decade because it's an important idea. The important idea should still matter in a decade. So let me allow the book to have the time it needs to grow. Now, that doesn't mean I can do nothing, right? Like, I still had to schlep the first 600, 800 copies myself, like, because otherwise who's going to recommend it? Who's going to know about it? So there's a bit of both. And if you have the platform, so like if you are excited by the idea of growing on Medium or Substack or newsletter or blog or whatever you prefer, will that help you? Yes, absolutely. It's hard to do as a short-term like value per hour invested equation because the payoff's in the future and the value being spent is now. So it's like, it's different math for different people. But I would say if you're going to write 3 books, then 100% it's worth it. It's going to be the best investment you ever make. If you're going to write 1 book, then it's ambiguous, probably helpful. But you know, it's like there's other ways also. You can do event giveaways, you can do individual networking, you can do PPC ads. Like, platform is in many ways a magic bullet, but it's a very expensive magic bullet. Like, which is why I haven't chosen to do it. Like, my personality is very poorly suited for writing a weekly email. Like, I like to write something once a year very intensely. I don't like to write something every week. So for me, just my personality doesn't align with newsletters, which is why I focused so hard on this word of mouth and organic growth and other alternatives. Because, like, you know, I still want my stuff to succeed, but in a way that aligns with my personality. Super long answer, sorry for that, and not a clear answer, but that's what I think about it. Oh, and let me also riff for just a moment off what you mentioned about publishing. The publishers right now are, what they're worst at is valuing unproven talent. Publishers are very good at maximizing the value of proven authors. One way you can prove yourself is by having your earlier book succeed. A second way to prove yourself is to have a very large audience. Ideally email, but any following would work. Those two, either previous successes or large following, completely de-risk it from a publisher's perspective, and then they will offer you the best deals they have available, and they will support you in the way that you expect. Publishers are very bad, however, at judging a book on its own merits. They use the credentials of the author more so than the merits of the book. So if you're an unproven, unplatformed author, they just don't know what to do with you. And so usually they give you no deal. And if they give you a deal, it's not a good deal. And so many authors are choosing to get around this, regardless of whether they plan to go self-pub or trad-pub in the future. They basically start by self-publishing until they've proven themselves. And then if they want to, they transition into a publishing deal in a situation where they have leverage. Nir Eyal did this. He sold each of his books, Indistractable and Hooked, have both sold more than 500,000 copies, which is pretty remarkable for nonfiction. And publishers laughed him out of the room when he first approached them with his first book. And so he said, you know, that's fine. I'll do it myself. He self-published the first version of Hooked. Once it had 100 5-star reviews on Amazon, he said the publishers started calling him, and he basically got to set his terms. And so he pulled his self-published version from Amazon and he republished it through the traditional publishers. And you know, now he sold a million copies between those 2 books. And that's a common story that you hear, just because publishers are not risk-taking machines. So you need to find a way to de-risk it for them if you want to work with them on good terms. But self-publishing is also fine. I've self-published all 3 of mine and I've enjoyed that, but it's like twice as much work because you need to learn a bunch of other junk about business in order to do that successfully.
Very helpful. But thank you.
Right. Next is Min.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for this. This is just so helpful. I'm in Australia, by the way, and it's getting on for 11 o'clock.
Yeah, it looks dark outside. Thank you for joining.
Oh, pleasure. Real pleasure. Thank you. I just have a list and I'd like you to just riff on whatever comes to you. Coach, teacher, mentor, guide, exemplar, sage, guru. Where do you place yourself?
So I'm definitely, personally, I'm teacher. So I'm a terrible coach because I think I have empathy, but I lack sympathy, maybe. And so I have a lot of trouble connecting with people's like one-on-one problems. And, that's a personal failing that pops up across both my businesses. Like it makes it hard for me to be a good manager. It's caused all sorts of trouble in my relationships. It's just whatever, that's the way I am. But I love understanding a piece of knowledge and then figuring out a way to explain that so that it clicks for people. And so I used to have a relatively successful kind of public speaking career, but it was I never did any inspiration. I never did any coaching. It was just like, I understand how this works. I will explain it to you. The results are your problem. But like, I made sure that I spent the time to understand that the education was designed as best I could. So I'm definitely that. But I think they're all valid and all valuable also. And it's like what feels like an authentic representation of the interesting stuff you figured out and, that aligns with your personality and that will allow you to stay in it for the long game. Because, it takes a while to write a book and that book will be even more successful if you're interested enough in it and your readers that you're willing to continue engaging with them afterwards. So for example, one way I've done that is I don't want to engage with people one-on-one in coaching, but I love answering questions. And so I told people if they have questions, just email them to me and I reply with a YouTube video. So I make a short 5-minute YouTube video that's like, hey, here's my answer to your question. And they send in questions about any of my 3 books. And I've only started recently. I have, 1,500 YouTube followers now. But it's easy, it's 0 time cost. That's a question I would have answered anyway. And for me, the time cost of recording it as video is the same as answering by email, but now I'm also slowly building an author platform that aligns with my personality. It doesn't require me to do weekly consistency. It just requires me to answer questions for readers, which I love doing. And so, yeah, I mean, like I wouldn't cast any value judgment on any of the ones you said. I think the trick is just finding the one that aligns with you and then not doing things the hard way. Like you go, okay, it's helpful if people know about me because then they'll know about my books. But like, I don't necessarily want to do that in the traditional ways. What's a way I can allow people to know about me, which feels authentic to the activities that I enjoy doing on a daily basis or weekly basis or whatever. I got kind of philosophical there because it's a little bit abstract, but No,
that's really important. From what you were saying earlier too, I think exemplar would have to be part of what you do because you were saying one part of your approach is to share your own learning process. So you lay that out. I know this and I know this much and I want to know this much more and this is how I got there. So that's exemplar.
Yeah, maybe. I feel I'm not sure anyone necessarily wants to follow my journey, but it's like, on my messy journey, I've learned a thing or two. Let me share those pieces with you. It's kind of the view I've taken. But it's also interesting that this shifts over time. And now the book I'm working on is my 4th is, it's maybe more in the direction you're talking about. And so it's, our interests and our goals and our inclinations will shift over time. And I think that's fine as well. But early on, I was like, I was not confident about my career or my place in the world when I wrote my first book. Like I knew I'd figured out one small detail that mattered. And so I really tried to scope it to saying like, I have no idea what's going on, but I know this piece. so that was the way I dealt with the imposter syndrome, is to say like, let me just talk about this small piece that I know. And, I hope you find it valuable. And now it's like, I mean, it's 10 years later, I'm a little bit more confident now. And so like my scope's slowly widening.
Thank you.
The next question is from Carol. Please unmute yourself, Carol.
Sorry about that. I'm talking to myself there. And thank you very much for doing this, both of you. I've got a question. I've got an embroidery website and I've got about 9,000 subscribers to my newsletter. But giving it away, I haven't actually written one for about a year. Would writing to those people, asking them to help with a book I'm writing, be sort of beyond reality? Would that be a good idea, or would that be bad to start again writing to them just because I want something? Does that make sense?
It does indeed. So with every communication, so as you build an audience, whether it's an audience of customers, of fans, or whatever, essentially what's happening is you're accumulating a reservoir of goodwill, because you've delivered over the years information about their hobby, about their interests. And so that they trust you. You have this backlog of goodwill, of good faith, and you're then able to spend that goodwill to get favors. So for example, like a favor would be like, hey, look at this thing that I made and I'm ready to sell. So kind of the favor of self-promotion, or the favor of asking someone to fill out a survey to give you information or feedback. However, the goodwill takes a long time to accumulate, and it drains very quickly once you start cashing it in. So the way to balance that, and this is not scientific at all, this is just the way I see the world, so I might be wrong. The way to balance that is to try to structure these communications in a way where there's a give and a take. So it's mutually beneficial. So I would not personally send an email that said, help me out, but I would send an email saying like, hey, here's like a sample of the exciting new thing I'm working on. It's like, it's just for you. If this topic is of interest to you, like I would love to keep sharing even more with you before anyone else in exchange for your feedback. So find a way that it's like, even that first contact has something in it. It's like, hey, this is, here's something special for you. That's one way to do it. That's giving the gift of content or early access in exchange for the feedback, and allowing them to opt in. So not trying to force it or squeeze feedback out of every person, but just giving your audience a chance to be like, to raise their hand, to say, I'm interested, I'm into this. When Arvid Kahl did it with his email list, he basically offered people 3 tiers of opt-in. He said, hey, I'm working on this thing. I think it might be relevant to you. I'm not going to send you a bunch of emails about it, but if you want to hear, if you want to know early, tell me, do you want to know when it's finished? Do you want to know when it's like in progress, but decent, so that you can give me some feedback, but it's still pretty good? Or do you want just like the pure raw mess as soon as I have it? It's going to be confusing. It's going to be messy. It's going to be ugly. But, if you really want the knowledge and you want to be involved in the creation process, like, I'd love to have you in there. And that's the way he structured it. And then people opted into these 3 tiers or none at all. And it meant that he was freed of that guilt of wondering, ooh, do they want to keep hearing about this? Because he'd given them the chance to opt in. That works. Like, obviously, a lot of people won't. If you have a list of 9,000, which is awesome, you're not going to get 9,000 opt-ins, but you'll get some. And you don't need everyone. The point of these early stages is not to optimize your marketing. It's to ensure that you're building a book that's going to resonate with your audience. It's to ensure that you're in contact enough with your future readers that you're making something that works for them and delights them and delivers on what it promises on the cover. So you actually don't need huge volumes. So I would say, yes, definitely use that resource, but try to structure it in a way that feels valuable to them, and allow them to kind of opt in to get involved, and and then treasure those people, because they're amazing and they're going to help you out so much.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I've got one slight problem with that. The newsletter software I use doesn't allow for any segmentation, so it's just either to everybody or nobody. So
yeah, well, you can then, I don't know the right way to solve that. I mean, that's a tech problem, but it is solvable, and you can do the initial scan through your main newsletter, and then like if you give some way to people to identify, like, hey, if you want to go to this website with a form and tell me your email, it's like you're basically building a secondary overlapping newsletter.
okay.
You
Makes
know,
sense.
and you just create a second list, and there's smarter ways to do it, but they would take a while to describe, and that will work well enough.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Next one is Wilbert. And this is time check. We're nearing the end of the hour.
Yeah. So for people who are not considering on writing useful books, why should they write useful books?
I mean, you don't need to. There's a lot of great types of books out there, you know, like fiction is wonderful, memoir is wonderful, everything's wonderful, philosophy, like write what you are excited about. The benefit of useful books as a product category is that they're more predictable than other categories of books. Art as a product, like art is unpredictable. Like it's great to be a famous artist, but like most artists aren't famous, right? And what useful books give you is like the whole definition of a useful book is it's solving a problem for a reader who cares. That problem could be abstract. It could be like, I want to understand the economy because it doesn't make any sense. And like, what's going on with inflation? It could be emotional. It could be a journey, like whatever. And when that's true, you can test its desire ahead of time. You can use reader conversations and beta readers as advanced warning and advanced indicators of how important this book is to readers. Like, do they like it? Do they tell other people? Whereas normally, if you write a book the traditional way, or you write like a novel, you tend not to know if it's going to succeed until after it's finished. And the most expensive part of creating a book is the last bit. The expensive part of creating a book is editing and polishing and promoting. And the when you write a useful book, like a problem solver, you have the advantage of being able to figure out ahead of time. It's like, do people want it? Does it work? And you can figure that out before you do the expensive final steps of polishing and promoting it. And so is it possible you still run into a dead end? Sure. But at least you're going to find that dead end as early and as inexpensively in the process as you want. And then you can make a decision. And this is a tough decision, but you can make it. You can go like, okay, well, am I now going to finish this book as a passion project for myself because I haven't found like the evidence that it resonates with readers, but it would be important for me, which is totally valid? Or am I going to rescope it, switch it, change it, throw it away? In an effort to find something that's likely to find a more eager reader base. And that's something you just can't do with novels or with pleasure givers or memoirs or any of these. Those are much more like all or nothing. So that's why to me, this makes sense as a business model. My original goal when I started writing was freedom. I wanted enough income coming in from my books that I didn't have to have a day job, that a day job would be a choice. And so for me, like I didn't want like the $1 million copy. Well, it would have been nice, but like my primary goal is like, I want a reliable path to a few thousand per month from royalties, because that will enable other parts of my life that matter to me. So for me, the reliability was very important. And so that's why I particularly like this product category.
All right, I guess we have two last questions, one from Jonathan and one from Lisa. May I suggest that both ask their question before Rob answers so that we close it with these two questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Rob, for meeting at this time of day. Appreciate that. You mentioned earlier that people have good bullshit detectors. How do you determine when to back up claims and anecdotes with references to supporting material without kind of overloading them with, bombarding them with references? Thank you.
Great question.
And my question, it may be less relevant to the group, but I'll throw it out there. So I've written my first draft and have been like stuck at that for like several years. And something you said helped get me unstuck. So I want to thank you for that. But a big piece of this is that the first draft came out of my head and the second draft needs to come out of the literature. And I'm overwhelmed by the literature. And it's just been difficult to get to know how to manage a literature and get it down into a book. So any advice you have would be appreciated.
Cool. So regarding Jonathan's question about the credibility and the backup and stuff, your beta readers are going to tell you. So part of the beta reading is to create a situation where people feel that you're able to handle criticism and that you're actually excited by it. And part of this is the way you respond to other comments. Like I built specific software called Help This Book to kind of enable this, but you can do it in Google Docs. I've done it for my second book. We use Google Docs. When someone criticizes you in the comments, which everyone else can see, do you argue with it or do you say thank you and build on it? And so if you take this improv mindset where you're building on the criticism and you're showing them how it gets used, then people are like, oh, wow, I'm helping, I'm helping to create this thing. And then they'll look at a fact. And I've got comments from Workshop Survival Guide, like verbatim comments, people going, this sets off my bullshit sensor, or like, whoo, this is a bold claim. I hope it's true, but I don't believe you yet. And they told me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to like either tighten the claim to be more specific and accurate, or I need to support it somehow, or I need to tell them I'm going to support it later, or elsewhere, footnote, appendix, like later chapter, whatever. You don't always need to do everything right that minute though, because when people pick up a book and buy it, make that decision, they click on Amazon, they already believe that you're credible. So a mistake that a lot of authors make is to try to reconvince the reader that they're credible with the first 30 pages. They already trust you. Like all you have to do now is not screw it up. So they kind of give you the benefit of the doubt toward the early stages of a book. So get to the good stuff, like get to the, so I see a lot of authors overcompensate and try to justify themselves too much at the start of the book, where at the start of the book is when you should be most confident, because that's when they already believe you. And then like, once you've hooked them with like the whatever, like the promise, the aspiration, the vision, you've started delivering the value they came from, then you kind of have their attention. Again, you've built up this reservoir of goodwill, and you can then spend that by being like, okay, let me tell you the boring theoretical justification. But you don't want to start with the boring theoretical justification in most cases. So yeah, it's kind of a general answer. Like it's going to depend also on your topic. Like if you're talking to surgeons, you probably need to be a bit more fact-based and credible than if you're talking to, whatever. But that's some thoughts. Trust your beta readers and probably do less than you think and kick it further into the book than you think.
Thanks a lot.
And for Alyssa, so the first draft onward and getting organized and switching into research mode, different authors enjoy different parts of the process. From the way you asked the question, I'd imagine you're like me, where you love the first draft and hate the editing. And that's always been my experience. And what I try to do is basically trick myself into doing it. So for me, the first draft is zero work. I know a lot of authors struggle with a first draft and they find editing easy. I'm the opposite. So I do the first draft, maybe I do a rewrite, but still it's like, it's mine. I haven't like fact checked it. I haven't verified it. And then the two ways I trick myself is like, okay, well, like this is good and I care about it, so I got to finish. And the only way to finish is to do an hour per day. A lot of the time you spend an hour, then you keep going. And the other way I trick myself is with beta readers. So I go like, I have to share this with beta readers next week, like non-negotiable, like whatever I have, that's what I'm sharing. And that's a little bit of a forcing function. And even if it's still garbage, it's like, suddenly people find value in it, or they hate it and get angry at you, or they go, wait, tell me more about this. Like, where's the data on this? And suddenly you're not dealing with your own blank canvas. You're reacting to the pull of your readers, and that tends to pull you in a commercially successful and impactful direction, because those are the people you're trying to serve. That's what I do. I don't know. It's work. There's no like magic trick here. We were interviewing Nir Ayal in our authors community recently, and he's like big on habit building. And someone goes, "What's the habit? How do I do this so that I can give as much attention to my own project as I do to my job, which I don't even care about?" And Nir's answer was that habits are automatic. Writing is never going to be a habit because it's never automatic. Every day you wake up and it's a choice. It's a hard choice, and you choose it every day. And if you keep doing that, you're a writer. And it's like, so I'd say stop looking for the trick and just be like, okay, this is the part of the process I do not enjoy, but I'm going to get through it because like it matters to me. And there's parts on either side of this step that do matter to me. And, and reconnect with your readers would be my advice.
So helpful. Thank you so much.
So let me just, I know we're over time, but let me just say, if I missed anything, I'm going to be paying attention to the book club and chipping in occasionally. But if you have just a specific whatever thing targeted at me, throw it onto my YouTube channel, comment on any video, or email me. I'm super easy to track down online, and I will reply with a little video. So I know we didn't have time to get to everyone, but I'll try to make that happen. And also, I'm going to be back, I hope, at the end of the book club, right? So we'll have a little final celebration.
All right.
So cool. Thank you so much, everyone.
And thank you so much, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks.
So this has been great. I think everyone will agree that this hour has been awesome. And I think this is just a taste of the actual book. I mean, that has been what Rob has been working on for the past year. So I'm looking forward for everyone to interact with the book, to ask questions there, and for everyone as well to start answering those questions, to wrestle with ideas there, and also to become writers of useful books ourselves. So next steps here. So if you haven't yet signed up for Access to Books, so just go to that link sent by Matt, and the Rome team will start adding us after this. And we'll also be sending emails on the schedules.
They've all been added now. I did through the session. Yeah.
Cool. So we'll be this one is being recorded, and we'll be posting this, and you will receive those links to the email. And if you are in the Slack channel, you will also see that there. Did I forget anything, Matt or Wilbert?
No, if you have any questions with Graph Access, please write to support@Rome Research and we'll sort you out. But everyone's been added who's paid for the book and signed up via the type form. So excited to see what's to come.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And we're looking forward to making this a great Rome Book Club. See you all. Thanks again, Rob.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Khalil.